You're listening to the Uplevel Your Online Business Show, where wealth is empowering, purpose is crucial, and high vibes are non-negotiable. And now, here's your host, certified business coach and practical woo strategist, Sarah J. Loureiro.
Hey Biz Babe, do you feel like you have a beautiful, big vision for your business yet are struggling to bring in consistent clients? If so, I totally know how you feel and I've got you. I used to struggle with getting and booking consistent clients when I first started my first business 4 years ago. But after implementing this amazing 6-pillar system that I've figured out for myself, I was able to get fully booked literally within a matter of weeks. If you want the same system, I'm actually giving it away for free in my fully booked in 30 days checklist for coaches and creatives. So you can find that on bit.ly/fully booked in 30. That's capital F, capital B, fully booked in 30. Check it out. I promise you that it is going to help you so much.
Welcome back to another episode of the Uplevel Your Online Business Show with me, Sarah J. Loureiro, certified business coach and practical boost strategist for coaches and creatives who want to bring their big business visions to life. I am super excited to have Michelle on today. Michelle Barry Franco is a speaker, author, and executive coach with special focus on public speaking and communication. She works with some of the most recognized leaders and thought leaders in their industries, as well as their clients and teams. And she's going to be talking to us today all about becoming a speaker, how to book speaking gigs. And just to let you guys know, we are actually recording this episode on March the 25th of 2020. We are all in the middle of lots of uncertainty, lots of lockdowns, a lot of a push for a lot of people. I think this is a bit of a wake-up call and an opportunity to do a lot of these things online. So I'm really interested to see what Michelle has for us today. So Michelle, thanks so much for being on the show. Do you want to kind of just tell us how you got into being a coach, being a speaker, and finding out that you had your own leadership within you? What's your story?
Thank you, Sarah. I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for having me. My story is so one of the things that I help people do is tell their own story of thought leadership. And yet every time my story starts, I'm like, wait, do I know my story? So everyone out there who has that moment, yeah, me too. So, and usually that's because we want to, of course, think about the context of the conversation that we're having. So fascinating, even as I think about how I got to be a speaking coach, which I get asked all the time. I didn't even realize till maybe it was probably 5 years ago, that I actually started speaking when I was in high school. And it's funny, you'd think I would have realized it, but it's actually consistent with how I think about speaking now. So I'll go back very quickly through that part of the story. But when I was in high school, we lost my brother, my second to the oldest brother. I have 7 siblings from various family configurations, but my second to the oldest brother died of an alcohol overdose. And I was about 16 and he was 22. And I had just started at a new school kind of recently. And so I after I took at least a few days off, I don't really remember that period really well, I went back to school and I learned there was Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. It was like we had this little chapter at our school. And while it wasn't a drunk driving accident, it was like alcohol related. And we have all kinds of alcohol and addiction issues in my family. And so I just checked out the meeting and I ended up joining Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. It was called MAD, probably still is. And what we did as part of MAD is we would go around to different classrooms in my high school and ultimately other high schools and show these gory car crash scenes, trying to convince our fellow classmates not to drink and drive. So I did that for some period of time in high school. Then when I got into college, I was studying human sexuality. HIV and AIDS was everywhere. We didn't have good medications. It was just spreading. And it was a really scary time. And of course, college is a highly exploratory time sexually for many, not all. So I joined the peer education program, and I went around to classrooms on campus with a banana and a binder full of the many textures and flavors of condoms. So I started speaking in high school, and then was speaking in college, but I never thought about it that way. So that's how it started. And then I didn't realize actually that I had done that until 5 years ago, when I was like, wait a minute, I actually have been standing in front of rooms of people talking about these topics, these issues that really matter, from a lot longer than I realized.
Isn't that interesting? You reminded me now that you were kind of talking about that whole situation about when I was in my 9 to 5. So I was in my 9 to 5 for about 6.5 years. And before my 9 to 5, for some reason, I didn't think that I was an extrovert. I think it's because I have an older sister and she's so much more extroverted than I am. And so I went through most of my life just thinking that I was like a shy introvert. And then when I was in my 9 to 5, there were a lot of speaking gigs. And it was just so funny because I was so interested in it, right? Like every single time our manager was like, we need a master of ceremonies, I'd be like, I'll do it. And then all of my coworkers hated speaking. And so they'd all just be like, no, Sarah can do it. Right? Like, oh, I think Sarah really wants to do it. And it was so funny because like deep down inside, I was like, yes, pick me. Right.
Yeah.
And then, throughout doing coaching, therapy, a whole bunch of different modalities and in a huge transformation that I went through, I found out that I was actually an extrovert. And then I started talking to some of my friends about it. They're like, that makes so much sense. Why would you not think so? Like, I was an orientation leader in university. And it's just kind of funny because you have this path. I think we all have a specific path, and we don't really realize that we're on it until like it's, like that retrospect, that hindsight, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. And about introversion, extroversion, and public speaking, another fascinating tidbit is I'm an introvert, but nobody ever experiences me
Right.
that way. Most people would not say that about me. And many speakers are. Not all, but it's actually, there's two things that I want to pull out from what you were just talking about. One is speaking can be quite solitary. Yes, you're in front of a big room of people sometimes, but boy, you got to take that time to dive deep on what you want to say, and you got to spend some time with yourself or a good coach or some mix. It's ideally you can, but even if you just want to figure out what you want to say, you've got to be able to go in and find that, and then you're really standing on the stage by yourself most of the time. So it's a funny thing. People will think it's an extroverted thing, but it's probably half and half, or
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? I really like that.
Yeah. And then the other thing
that's good.
that you said that I think is really, that I just would love to highlight, is I absolutely believe and say all the time that some of us are called to share our stories, our expertise, our voice on behalf of a message or a mission. And I feel like that's what you were experiencing. Like when you say that, it just lights up my insides, because no, you're right. Many people don't have that call, and some of us do. And when you do, sometimes I have clients all the time, or just people in my world, who fight it. They're like, but does this make me self-centered, or, do I have to love the spotlight? It's not that. You can love the spotlight. It's fine. But it's something else. That's what you're speaking to.
Yes, exactly. And it's just this burning desire inside. And I know a lot of my clients also feel the same way, that they want to have this, it goes beyond the dollar amounts that we make in our businesses. It goes beyond, like how many clients we want to sign up. And I think public speaking and just speaking in general is just such an interesting modality in coaching and just kind of in business and in life in general. So you've been you've been speaking for a long time now. What got you into coaching?
I call myself a kind of reluctant or sometimes haphazard speaking coach. It was more, I've done all kinds of different, I do a lot of messaging coaching as, part of it. And that's sort of how I started. But really what I found is when I discovered coaching, like so many of us, I was like, wow, what is this whole world? Right. And it was because I hired my own first executive coach. I was like, hey, I'm struggling. I was building my business. I started in 2008. No idea what I'm doing at the time. Sometimes I'm still like that, but and around 2010, I'm like, I got to get some help. So I start looking around. I find a coach and then in the process learn about coaching. And so that's really how the evolution happened. I have a communication expertise. I started, after all that stuff in high school and early college, I ended up getting a master's degree in speech communication studies. And I taught public speaking and other communication classes at the college level for 10 years plus, off and on at various times. So I started teaching what I had learned as a communication expert in the business world, mostly because I saw that it was missing. Like I would meet people out at networking events and they just would stumble around on what to say. And so it was like, oh, well, I could just help you. So then I started speaking at some of these events, largely because I would go to them and it seemed like people didn't know how to talk about their business. So I would like, okay, I'll get up and stand on the stage and help other business owners, because I was just trying to meet other business owners as I was building my own. And I then would teach about how to talk about your business. So then I started doing messaging. And then people would go, wait, you taught college public speaking? And I'd say, yes. And they'd say, hey, can you talk about public speaking? It was just this weird evolution. And I was like, yeah, of course. And of course, when I first started teaching about public speaking, I was teaching it like best practices in presentation skills. And that's awesome. Those are really good baseline, but those are not actually the best way to speak. There are different ways to craft talks depending on your outcome goals. So that was an evolution. Me learning how to speak on behalf of my business as a way to attract clients naturally without weird, icky selling, which is something I refused to do and hated when I would see happen. So it was just sort of an evolution from there. That's how it started. And then my offerings would shift as people would ask me for different things.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. And so, okay, given the current climate as of March the 25th of 2020, and just everything that it is that you teach in terms of speaking, I mean, if someone's listening to this and they're just like, oh, you know what, I have this burning desire to really start speaking, really start honing in on the message that I want to share with people, where would you tell them to start?
So they're business owners and they haven't been on any stages. Is that, give me a little bit.
Exactly.
What do they do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Business owners. So let's say, for example, they're coaches, they're mentors, they're aspiring coaches, aspiring mentors, strategists, and they know that they have a bigger message to share with the world. And they know that they really want to do that via having their own stage, right? Whether it's a virtual stage or an in-person stage, what would you suggest that they start with?
Yeah, clarity of message. I mean, two things for sure that I see missing all the time. Actually, these two are tied, and I'll talk about what I mean by them being tied. So first of all, what is it you want to say? And I mean this with full alignment. And I know you talk about this because having listened to your podcast, people will be out there telling you what you should be saying. People will tell you what you have to say in order for this business to work, right? And they will be wrong because we are on this earth to say and do. Again, I'm not saying this is not me saying there's a certain divinely guided path and I have no idea exactly how it comes through us, but I do know that when the thing that's missing often is they don't have clarity about what they want to say. What is the thing that I call it your rooftop message, that they just want to get on the rooftop and shout?
Ooh, I
And
love that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if I can I do a little exercise with you?
Yes, yes,
Okay, let's try
please.
it. So, so I want you to imagine with me, and of course, everyone listening can do this too. Close your eyes if you're
Mm-hmm.
not driving. um,
Mm-hmm.
so imagine you're in this little town, and the streets in this little town are full of people. And there's just chaos everywhere. And they're talking to each other and they're saying, "Oh, I'm so frustrated. What are we going to do? I feel like I've tried everything. I have no idea what to do anymore." And you're standing there among them and you're listening to the problems that they're experiencing. And you're thinking, this is exactly what I can help you with. Like, I can totally help these people. But there's chaos everywhere. And so you try to tell a few people, but they can't hear you because there's chaos. So you look to the right, you see this building. Against the building is a ladder, and this ladder leads up to a reasonably flat roof. So you walk over, you climb that ladder, you get to the edge of the roof, you cup your hands around your mouth, and you say, "Listen to me, beautiful people. Here is what you need to know to make your lives better." What would you say?
Mm. I think for me, it's positive thought psychology is something I go back to all of the time. I'm also a certified yoga teacher, and
Mhm.
one quote that I always loved was like, all that you are is a result of what you've thought, right? The mind is everything. What we think, we become.
Mhm.
And that's just something that is just always rampant in my mind and just kind of goes over and over and over again. And I know that that's a huge part of coaching and thought leadership, right? Um, I'd be curious for everyone else who's listening, if you'd love to, keep in touch with myself or with Michelle, you can always head over to my Instagram and let us know what popped up for you.
Mm,
What is your Instagram, Michelle?
yeah.
I think it's,
Michelle
do I
B.
have it in front of
Franco.
here? Yeah, Michelle B. Franco. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let us know if you just did that exercise with us. Let us know what popped up into your mind as well. I love that.
Yeah, I'd love to know that for sure. And, the thing about people often, when I do this at a lot of my speaking events or when I'm speaking at someone else's, workshop or whatever, a lot of people will say, like, "Okay, here's my rooftop message. Is this right? Does this work?" And so just
Mm.
in case that's coming up for people, which would make sense to me, of course, uh, your rooftop message is kind of raw, right? It's like just like you did. Perfect. What comes to you to say to these beautiful souls that you want to serve? And so that's where you start. What is it you want to say to them? And then, of course, the equally important question, maybe even a tiny bit more important, is who are those people on the streets? Like, what do they
Mhm.
care about? What are they thinking? What does their life look like right now? What are their desires? What are their biggest struggles? And then we need to steep ourselves. And this is missing a lot in the coaching world. We need to steep ourselves in what they are experiencing, not what we want to say. And it's a
Mhm.
really important
Mhm.
distinction because this is why, and of course, lots of coaches do it really well. Lots of strategists, lots of, people who work in all the arenas that are probably your listeners, my listeners too. A lot of them do it really well. And oftentimes, because it's our water, it's our natural world, we go to, here's what's possible. Here's what you need. It is here's what you need to do, but we're too far down the road. We're not meeting them where they are. So that's why when we steep ourselves in their world, we are inclined to say things like, "Oh, I so hear you. Here's what it looks in you. Here's what you're struggling with, but here's what you wish for. Now here's how to get there." With that empathy, that creation of connection, we can start to teach and serve and inspire.
And this is so interesting because this really goes back to marketing and niching and clarifying your
Mhm.
message, right? I love how you said that we often want to teach from a specific vantage point, but it's so much more important and valuable to really speak from the place where your ideal clients and your people need to hear it from, right?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people really miss that part. And it's kind of like, well, you're up here, right? Like you've been doing this work for so long, but you also understand that your people need to hear it from the vantage point that you were at right before you decided to create a change in your own life.
Yeah.
If that in fact is your ideal client.
Right. Right. Which it often is, right? But not always. So you can always use your, a client that you helped. You were steeped in their world right before it got better. So you can go to their thoughts. One of the things that I love to do with clients, and I share this on my, I have like a free blog post that shows how to do this. So is I love to take all of that, there's a lot, oh my gosh, you probably hear this too. When you say do an ideal client avatar, or I call it ideal audience member, your ideal audience member sort of avatar. But this exercise, I've had so many people tell me it's super helpful to them. And what you can do is I'll draw a picture. I've drawn hundreds of these probably at this point for clients and in workshops. Like you draw the person, put them in their context. You don't have to be an artist. If you see my drawings, you'll know how true I mean, how true that is. You draw them, put them in their environment. What does their context look and feel like? Our brain processes information differently through pictures. So even as the person drawing it, even as the person looking at it while it's being drawn, you get different ideas. And then, really importantly, you start to put those thought bubbles above their head in their words. And it is gold. This is where the gold is. What are they saying? And you fill that whole, I'm picturing and usually doing it on a large, those Post-it notes you can hang on the wall, that big flip chart size. Yeah, when you do that, then you've got all kinds of marketing messaging. You've got all kinds of content for your talk right there on that sheet of paper.
I love really like getting a lot further into ideal client avatars too. And really, I always ask my clients too, like, do you feel like they have a name? Like if you were to envision her, like what would her name be as well?
Yeah.
The more specific that you get, the better, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, now they have their ideal client. They have exactly what it is that they want to speak about, and they are just itching to get on a stage or to start somewhere. Where do they start?
Well, they need to go where they gather. So I wrote a book, and I'll give a link to get a free copy. Anyone can get a free copy of the book, and it's called Beyond Applause. And in it, I talk about the path to thought leadership. And essentially, the path to thought leadership is, and this is going to answer your question, you take a stand for something that matters. And that's really what we just talked about. You get a crystal clear message, you know who you're sharing it with, and then you craft it for them. Take a stand for something that matters to them. And then you commit to serve through that stand. And that's so vague. And, so of course there's a lot more in the book about that. But essentially here is where you go, okay, like who do I need to be? I've heard you talk about this. Who do I need to be in order to step into, how do I find that place in me that steps fully into leadership with this message on behalf of serving these people? And of course, where do they gather? So the last part is go where they gather and serve. So you craft a really good talk, you craft a great webinar, you take the content, you take those thought bubbles from above their head, you answer the most pressing questions for them in a content-rich, what I call magic mix of content. You've got story, you've got research, you've got examples that apply to their own life inside of this webinar or this podcast or this talk that you're doing from a stage. And then you take that product, which is loosely crafted because you always customize it for whatever audience you have, and then you go where they gather and serve. You've got to figure out, where do these people go to solve this problem? And as a thought leader, you think often, where do they gather to solve this problem? And then you go there, you get to know them, you become connected in that community, and you offer to speak or serve in various ways as a thought leader.
Ooh, yes. I love how you listened to the podcast, by the way. I think that's wonderful.
Of course.
It's so important too, to just kind of get that perspective. But it's definitely something that I love talking about as well, because I think it's so important to kind of just come back to, who are we becoming, right? Like, how are we embodying this leader that we really want to be? And I think that those are usually, and this is exactly what you're saying, those are usually the questions that we need to ask ourselves before we actually even get into the strategic work, right? Because once we
That's
can
right.
ask ourselves and answer those questions, then the strategic work is like you're saying, it becomes so much easier. And so you're saying online, it would thought leadership and just like really becoming a speaker would look like webinars, would look like, podcasts, would look like live videos.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you kind of branch into? I know I've spoken at summits before. I think that
Yeah.
those are really key as well.
Yes, summits. I don't know. I think if you think about thought leadership overall, of course, there's book writing, there's articles, there's guesting on podcasts,
Mhm.
as well as starting your own podcast. There's, like you said, Facebook Live series. There are so many ways to serve with your thought leadership and with your message now. You don't need, there's, there's some places you need someone else's permission. Right. So a
Mhm.
stage is one of the most coveted places, right? Those meeting organizers or leaders or whoever's putting on the event, because I'll have people say to me, I can't even get free speaking gigs. And of course, that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, that because you are being, not because there's anything wrong with them, but because the gatekeepers have big gates at those places. You're
Mhm.
trusted with their audience. So I know you didn't ask this, but
Mhm.
one of the things that's probably coming up in people's minds, so you're probably about to ask it, is how do you get those opportunities? So of course, there's the ones you can create for yourself, and if you have a nicely sized audience, great, keep on, right? Actually, even if you don't, because it's a beautiful way to build an audience and build your stamina, your confidence around sharing your message. Just start doing those Facebook lives, start your podcast or whatever you've dreamed of doing in those domains. But if you want to get on someone else's stage, virtual podcast or an actual IRL in real life stage, it works like so many other things. It starts with, do you know anyone there? Because they're trying to decrease their
Mhm.
uncertainty, right? They want to be really confident that you're going to take amazing care of their audience. Their audience is going to leave telling their friends, we have got to come to this conference next year. And if they don't
Mhm.
know you, they're just not quite sure. So any way you can decrease the uncertainty around that, oftentimes knowing you helps, or a really trusted connection. But if not, you need to make sure you have a good platform, like with videos or and testimonials, that kind of social proof, so that they're more likely to say, okay, I can tell this person's a pro. They know what they're doing. I'll let them on my stage.
Yes, yes. So it's building up that trust over
Yes,
time, right?
exactly.
Building up
Yep.
that trust, building up that credibility.
Yes.
And one of the best places to do it in the beginning, it's kind of just like what you're saying, which is completely free,
Yeah.
is if you want to start a podcast. I mean, both of us started podcasts, and we
Right.
didn't necessarily have like a licensing or take a course on it, right? It's just you find out the information that will help you to do it, and sometimes you just have to rip the band-aid off and just do it, right? Like you have to just do your first Facebook live, you have to just go out there
Yep.
and do um your first webinar, for example. Just getting your feet wet, I think is so important, and then eventually you will lead up to the big stages.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about those big stages,
Okay.
because I know that when we first connected, I was telling you that I loved the whole idea of really focusing on TEDx.
Hmm.
We can talk about that really quickly right now. What do you think?
Great.
Just like how
Sounds
you
fun.
were able to get up on a TEDx talk, and how you've helped clients do the same. What is the process that you usually go through?
So first of all, I haven't done a TEDx talk yet.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's
I
okay.
thought I was reading it, and I was just like, TEDx speakers. Oh, awesome. Right. But
Yeah.
and I think this is really important that you say this too, because and for all of my previous clients, even who are listening to this, I
Yeah.
always say that you can help other people do things that you
Yep.
haven't done yourself.
Yeah.
And what a perfect segue into this with you and
Yeah.
the speaking gigs.
Yeah. And I've coached lots of TEDx speakers. So I have a ton of confidence around coaching a TEDx speaker. I've done it lots of times,
Mhm.
and my clients have gotten on the TEDx stage. So I've absolutely been, I know how to answer the questions about TEDx. And people ask me a lot, why haven't you done a TEDx? And I do know people in the TEDx world. I do believe I could get on a TEDx stage. It's just, I haven't decided what I want to say there yet. And to me,
Mm.
that's what matters
Mhm.
most. Like, and
Mhm.
yes, I know that I'll be nervous. Boy, I've been there. I've been in the green room with my TEDx speakers, and most of them are very seasoned leaders and speakers who are
Mhm.
on stages frequently for various reasons. And they're very, very nervous. So I'm also aware that that will be part of the experience for me, since I still get speaking anxiety. But we can still, of course, talk about the process of getting on the TEDx stage, because I've been there through that process a lot. And I know that it's really coveted. But I will say, from what you just said and from what I just said about my own TEDx speaking, it always does come back to, what is worth, first of all, when you prep for a TED Talk, you are going to prepare probably like you've never prepared for a talk before. That may not be true of every single person, but certainly
Mhm.
everyone that I've worked with, and many of them. One of my so Susan Hyatt. I don't know. Do you know who Susan Hyatt is?
No, I
She,
don't.
so she's just a life coach, and does a lot of really cool stuff in the world. But I coached her recently on her TEDx talk, and she talked about it publicly. So she was just saying, my coach just said to me, she has a super fun brand, so you should check her out. But
Mhm.
she's like, my coach just said to me that I have to practice 100 hours for my TEDx talk.
Mhm.
And there was this huge response. Everybody's like, well, your coach doesn't know that you're Susan Hyatt. It was a really fun conversation, which I didn't say she had to do that, but it's true that TED speakers often do practice many, 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 many hours. And so, as you think about what you want to do a TED talk on or a TEDx talk on, what is something that you want to say that's worth that for you? That you really want to put the time and energy in? Because if you choose well, and this is something to think about as you look for a TEDx event, if you choose well, it's probably going to be one of the best produced videos that you have in your assets. So it can be really
Mhm.
valuable. Now, not every
Mhm.
TEDx event has amazing audio and video. So if that's what you're looking for, you do want to do your research around the events and how their production is.
Yeah, and I've had a few friends who've gotten on stage, and I've seen their talks, and it's really interesting because you can definitely tell that this is like hours and hours
Yeah.
and hours in the making, right? It's you take one idea and then you are just constantly tweaking it, making sure that you have the right hook in the beginning, make sure that you have the right juiciness in the middle, making sure that everything is relating, everything is inspiring. And then of course you need to have, the end, the culminating thought that you leave everyone with. And I think it's
Yeah.
I know a lot of my people have talked to me about, like one day I want to be a TEDx speaker.
Yeah.
Um and I love how you kind of have like an evolution with everything that you do and the people who you lead, where it's like, okay, let's start with getting used to being on stage in a virtual way, right online with,
Yeah.
Facebook lives are free, right?
Yeah.
Super easy to do. You can already attract an audience to those, and then you can lead up from there to, webinars, summits, podcasts. And then, eventually you get to the place where, like you said, you pitch for TEDx, you pitch for, other different events, and you heighten that credibility. I know that it's much more complicated than that. And kind of just like reeling everything in now and just kind of summoning everything up. So anyone who really, really enjoyed this episode, where can they go to find you? I know that you talked about giving us a link to your book. I'd
Yeah.
love to have that link myself.
Yeah.
I find it really exciting. I'm always reading new books as well. So where can we find you, and where can we kind of just find out more information about your process and about just, how we can find out more in terms of engaging in speaking and really, bringing forth each and every one of our own thought leaderships.
So my book. So first of all, you can get a copy of my book at Michelle Barry Franco. It's Barry Franco with a C .com / free book. So you can
That's easy enough.
Yeah. Hopefully that makes it nice and easy. So you can go there, get a copy of the book. I actually also created this little mini course to go with it that just guides through the highlights of it. So for those who like I do, who like kind of the highlight version, you can use it supplementary with it, and it all just comes in the same thing. So that's the first thing. The second thing, to answer your question about, where can they learn more about speaking? I also have, I know I'm giving 2 links, so you can certainly have both of them.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, michellebarryfranco.com /start is Get Started Speaking Guide. And that guide will just walks you through like clarity of message, a lot of what we've talked about, but really the essentials. And even if you've already been speaking, even if someone who's listening has already been, it's so helpful to kind of go back through the basics. You can even just glance them over and be like, okay, I got that one already. But it talks about, and inside of that is also the only presentation outline you'll ever need, which is what I call Tapoyan. Which is, because it's catchy, but that gives you a framework and outline for crafting any presentation for any context. And my clients absolutely love it. And, listeners love it. So I love giving it away because I know, back to our earlier start of the conversation, I absolutely know with my full heart that to share your voice in a way that serves others, we have to do it. And so I want you to have the tools to do it, like actually go do it. So that Tapoyan will help you do that for sure.
Perfect. An actionable step.
Yeah.
Yay. Great.
Yeah.
All right. And you can check out Michelle on Instagram. What would you say is your favorite platform? Because you put Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn here, which is so funny because that's also my trifecta. Those are like the 3 platforms that I love as well. But which one is your favorite? Which one do you feel like you want people to find you on?
We could do a whole conversation about social media, but
right.
So I would say I probably am most frequent on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm always trying to be better on Instagram because I love the platform. I love the way it looks and feels. So both are good, but maybe, starting at the Facebook realm.
Okay. Great. Yeah. So I will leave all of your links in the podcast show notes. And I'm definitely going to take a look at that book. Thank you so much for being on here with us. It's been so nice having you. I feel like I've learned a lot, even about the process of speaking. And I hope that this has motivated so many of our listeners. So thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, did you like or love this episode? If so, I would so appreciate it if you left a review and rated this episode on iTunes. It would literally mean so much to me. And if you have Instagram and are all up in your Instagram stories like I am, I would love it if you would share this episode with your beautiful followers so they can also get all of the high vibes, all of the free information that I'm giving you here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Uplevel Your Online Business Show. If you enjoy our show and would like the show notes and free goodies about how to grow your online coaching business, head over to sarahjlorero.com for more information. We hope you'll tune in next time.